Okay, and we'll hand it over to Rick.
Well, thank you. We want to welcome Gayle Harrell and Dr. Robert Levy with us today. They're both running for Florida Senate District 25. We appreciate you taking the time to meet with our editorial board. I have 6 to 8 questions that I'd like to ask, and I'll give my colleagues on our editorial board an opportunity to chime in as they choose. But I will start. I'll start with you, Dr. Levy. Ask you to take 3 minutes, introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and why you're running for the Florida Senate.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the editorial board for inviting us to participate in this important event today. My name is Dr. Robert Levy. I'm a 35-year resident of the Treasure Coast, a physician and small business owner. From starting my practice on August 22nd, 1983, until it was sold on April 15th, 1997, our practice grew from myself to eventually 16 healthcare providers in 3 offices with 30,000 patients, revenue in excess of $7 million, and over 104 employees. After selling my practice, I became a volunteer at the Volunteers in Medicine Clinic. As you know, this clinic was established to take care of the patients who fall through the cracks. In addition to doing that, I'm a member of the Federal Disaster Medical Assistance Teams, which are called in by the federal government after natural disasters. I was at Hurricane Superstorm Sandy, and last year was Hurricane Maria. Chances are I would have been in North Carolina, except for the election. I'm running on healthcare, which is my big issue, as you can imagine. I want to make sure we expand Medicaid so that when the governor callously decided to exclude 75,000 people on the Treasure Coast, I want to change that. Healthcare is a right, it's not a privilege. I also want to be able to get a waiver for the Affordable Care Act, which I can go into more detail later, which eventually leads to lower premiums almost immediately. The other large issue that faces us, obviously, is the river. For the last 20 years, I think the one thing we can agree on is that the river has deteriorated substantially. Especially, it's accelerated under Rick Scott. I want to make sure that as you're a state senator, that we put people on the Water Management District who are scientists, not businessmen, not agribusiness. In addition, I want to restore the funding to the DEP and the 1,000 employees that were cut, and $70 million that was cut from that. I also want to make sure that we fully fund Florida Forever Amendment 1, which is currently, as you all know, in litigation to force the legislature to do what almost 75% of the populace decided to do.
I'm going to go ahead and stop you there. We're going to get into some of these.
That wasn't 3 minutes.
Yeah, I think it was pretty close. Gayle, I'm going to go to you. Introduce yourself and tell us why you're running.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you doing this and having us once again for this interview. I'm Gayle Harrell, and I'm running for the Senate District 25. I am a 47-year resident of the Treasure Coast. I have raised my family here. I'm a mom of 4 children, 8 wonderful, magnificent grandchildren. I have been an educator here on the Treasure Coast, teaching at Martin County High School. I also ran my husband's very large medical practice for many, many years. He practiced OBGYN here on the Treasure Coast. I owned a mammogram center as well as a laboratory and worked very closely with him in healthcare. I've been I've been part of the political process for 16 years now. I served in the Florida legislature from 2000 to 2008, and then from 2010 to 2016. It's certainly been an honor and privilege to serve the people of the Treasure Coast. I've also been very active in our community. Service is what I am all about, whether it is as a founding board member of Hibiscus Children's Center, a long-term member of Helping People Succeed way back when it was first Pioneer Occupation Center, then Tri-County Rehab Center, Tri-County Tech, and has moved into helping people with disabilities very, very much so. I also have had the honor, as I said, to serve in the legislature. And really the reason I'm running is to continue that work, to make sure we complete a lot of the things that I have started. Certainly for me, the number one issue is our river. I live on our beautiful North Fork of the St. Lucie River. It is really my passion to make sure that we continue the progress we are making. Legacy Florida was a game changer. We passed that in 2016. We've already put over $650 million into restoration of the St. Lucie, of the entire comprehensive Everglades restoration plan, but with priority given to those projects to stop the releases. I've also been very involved in education. I have a passion for those who have disabilities and so many other issues. I've been involved in legislation on a variety of things. Many of those things this editorial board doesn't really discuss. Child welfare in particular, mental health and substance abuse, veterans issues.
I'm going to stop you there. We'll get into some of that too. Both of you really segued in quite well into the next question I wanted us to discuss, and that's related to the river. Both of you, in your online questionnaire, seem to indicate that you see the river and protecting and preserving it as the number one, if not one of the most important issues in this election. So my next question is, if elected to the seat, what will you do going forward to help preserve and protect the river? I'll start with you, Gayle.
Thank you. As I said in my questionnaire, this to me is the number one priority. We have to continue the course in the actions we have initiated them, making sure that we get those $200 million, 25% of Amendment 1 money, going directly into comprehensive Everglades restoration, with priority given to stopping those releases. We've seen the devastation over the last year. This last summer has been terrible with the algae blooms. And certainly 2016, 2013, we've all lived that here. We're on the right track. We need to make sure we continue down that path. Senate Bill 10 is going to build the reservoir. We put $800 million into that. We need to make sure we get the federal funds to match what we are doing in the state. The state's put over $6 billion, more than that, especially now with Legacy Florida doing this solid reoccurring revenue source, $200 million at least for 20 years, $4 billion. The feds need to step up to the plate, and we at the state level need to continue the pressure on them to make sure they do that. We have already put over $100 million into dike restoration. That is key. We need to keep the pressure on the federal government to expedite that, do that as fast as possible. And then we need to deal with the lure schedule, not wait till that's finished in 2022. We need to make sure we look at that lure schedule right now and push the feds, the Army Corps of Engineers, really, to make sure that we start looking at that. They're claiming it's going to take 3 years to do that study. If there were some private entities there that would help step up to the plate, I am sure that could go much, much faster. Another thing I really think we need to do, and this is on the healthcare side of this, we really need to look at these algae blooms. We funded way back in 1999 the HAB task force. We put over $17 million into that over the years, but that has been focused. That's the harmful algae bloom task force. I have looked over the last year into reinstituting that, reconstructing that, to make sure we're addressing all algae blooms, not just red tide.
Let me stop you there. I want to give Dr. Levy an opportunity. Yeah, I know we do. There's a lot to discuss here. Dr. Levy, your plan for the protection of the river.
Well, as I mentioned in my opening statements, I do not trust the legislature to follow through on these initiatives. I believe that Senator Negron's reservoir was a fabulous start, but the legislature has a history of not adhering to what the public wants and what the voters want. For instance, Amendment 1, Florida Forever, we're in court to enforce the will of what the voters wanted. That shouldn't be the case. We are elected to represent the voters of the district, not the sugar industry. I'm proud to say that I'm sugar-free. You know, as we all know, $58 million was donated by the sugar industry to the legislature. In the last 20 years, I think Mrs. Harrell and I will both agree that the river has deteriorated substantially in the last 20 years. So the common denominator is that we've had the governorship, the state senate, and the state house have been controlled by one party. We need to change that. We need to have some semblance of balance put back into government. As I mentioned, the water management districts, there are no scientists on the water management districts. It's all agribusiness. On the DEP, we need to put the funding back where it started. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the answer to this question, the legislature has a history of not adhering to what the citizens of the state of Florida want. The lottery is another great example, where every year funds are shifted to not take care of what we instituted and what the voters decided that they wanted. And as I said, my concern is when you don't have a strong leader like Senator Nygren there, the legislature is going to completely do whatever they want unless we have the right representation in Tallahassee.
Okay, thank you. Each of you is seeking the seat that was held by Senator Negron, who was the Senate President for 2 years. I'd like to start with you, Dr. Levy, ask you to give Senator Negron's performance as Senate President a letter grade and evaluate and explain your answer.
Well, I give him, I believe, an A because I think he recognized that the river is the issue, the number one issue in our area, especially Martin County. I think St. Lucie County possibly not as high. I mean, it's still a very, very high priority. So I would give him an A. He put all his political capital into getting the reservoir started. I believe it's a good start. I know I'm not one of these absolutionists where if it's not everything we want, then we'll reject it. I think it's a good start. I think that as it gets started and as it gets implemented, things will get even better.
Okay. Gayle?
Yes, I certainly have big shoes to fill to stand in Joe Negron's place. And I'm so pleased he has endorsed me. I would give him an A+. I think his passion for the river comes through remarkably. Certainly Senate Bill 10 was key to building a reservoir south of the lake. I hope to continue his passion to really solve this whole problem. And I am a problem solver. I've worked on this issue for years. And certainly we saw major degradation of our river after 2008 when the lure schedule changed. And the Army Corps was very concerned about the amount of water held in the lake. Lowering that level and dumping more water on us has created a major problem. I think making sure we use Legacy Florida funds appropriately. Finishing projects. C-44, I have been instrumental in getting the original dollars to start C-44. Now we have Legacy Florida dollars, and that's going to be online in the next year and a half. It's a major step forward in holding all that water that is local runoff that pollutes our rivers as well. So I think making sure that we continue his legacy, work on all those projects, continue the funding, making sure that Legacy Florida stays there. We can count on that reoccurring funding source. And the good news about that is it's year after year. It is $200 million at least, year over year for 20 years. That's Amendment 1 money. And I agree, Amendment 1 money needs to be used appropriately. And that's why this last year I introduced Legacy Florida 2.0 to really start addressing the needs and look at the problems we have in the Indian River Lagoon.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. We kind of went a little further than just evaluating Senator Negron. Start with you this time, Gayle. The bright line conversation on the Treasure Coast has changed in recent months. For the past 4 years, local governments have been opposing it for good reasons related to safety. Brightline recently has offered possibly to build a station or two in our region. Local governments have begun discussing that. What is your position now on Brightline, and do you support local governments pursuing a train stop on the Treasure Coast?
My position on Brightline has not changed. I still am an opponent to Brightline. I would very much like to see it go west. I don't want to sink Brightline by any stretch of the imagination. What I think they need to do is look at alternative courses. Years ago, I had said I would be happy to have some discussions with CSX and move them west, go through Indiantown, go up through the center of the state. I think that is the ideal way to do it. However, local government has their various options to do what they see fit. I would not like to see them bargain with Brightline. I'm not sure that that is a viable alternative. I would really look at their financing. I think that's a major problem. They just had those bonds reauthorized, those public access bonds, and they were not able to sell them 3 times. Now we're going into another issuance of them. I don't know that they have the financial stability to even bargain with our local communities. So I would be very hesitant were I a local city official.
Okay, Dr. Levy.
Thank you. I think in some way, Representative Harrell and I agree on this. I'm not in favor of Brightline. I do believe that this latest proposal, which was maybe, kinda, we'll think about it in the future, is nothing but smoke and mirrors to distract us, to stop the litigation, and then to say, please put a station here. I think moving it west is a much better example, a much better alternative. I do not believe that in the long run, passenger rail service is really going to be successful anyway. I think it's just a way to then have increasing freight traffic. I don't know if you could name one place in the country where passenger rail service has been successful.
It's just the batteries might be wearing out. Try that.
Okay.
Well, I think it's pretty clear that the CSX route is not, it never was, and it is not an option at this point. It becomes more and more apparent that Brightline is going to build through the Treasure Coast and will be running on the FEC rail. So given what becomes seems to be more and more of a certainty, if we assume that the train is going to go through the Treasure Coast, should Fort Pierce or Stuart pursue a train stop, in your opinion? Yes or no?
If it's an inevitable situation, I can't see a reason why we shouldn't.
Okay. Gayle?
I would encourage them to get some guarantees before they ever consider it. We have been pushing at the state level to try and get some safety mechanisms in place and for the Brightline to pay for them. Cities and counties are going to wind up paying for a lot of these things that should be paid for by Brightline. And if they're going down this road, they need to negotiate all these safety measures that need to go in there. And I certainly would not encourage them to sign on the dotted line for anything without absolute guarantees on safety. Look at the numbers of people who have been killed already by Brightline.
Right. Okay. Thank you. The answer to this next question is, this is open-ended. Is there one issue that you believe doesn't get nearly the attention that it deserves, that merits more attention from lawmakers, from the public? I'll open that to whoever wants to answer the question first.
I will certainly jump into that.
Okay.
And it's something that I have been passionate about my whole life, and that's child welfare. And you all don't pay much attention to it. The news media doesn't pay attention to it until a child is killed. And we have too many children killed in this state of Florida. And that is something that I have worked on my entire legislative career. As I said, I'm a founding board member of Hibiscus Children's Center, and I have seen those kids. We are in the process of totally revamping our child welfare system, and nobody really pays attention to it. But those are one of the things that I work on very quietly around the corners. I passed major legislation, Senate Bill 1666 back in 2013, 12 or 13, was a game changer in the arena of child welfare. We also are looking at, and when we see the numbers of parents addicted to opioids And we need to address that. We need to address the whole opioid problem. Again, another issue that I have been involved in since back in 2002 when we had the pill mills right here on the Treasure Coast and had 6 deaths, overdose deaths, right here from a doctor on the Treasure Coast. So I think those are issues that only come to the forefront when there are deaths involved. And this is something the legislature and the media really need to look at what is happening and the dynamics of what is happening and the changes we are making, the significant changes we are making in the child welfare system.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just say, I think every
Sure.
one of us at the table has written on child
I was
welfare.
just thinking
at one
that.
point.
You have to say
Maybe
good
not the
night.
specific angles you're looking for, but it's certainly something we have to.
Some of them.
Yeah. Dr. Levy, is there an issue that you think deserves more attention?
Well, I believe healthcare does, even though it has been the forefront. Usually healthcare is the #1 issue from November until June, until they start the releases from the lake. As I said in my opening statements, I'm a physician, first and foremost. I've been dedicating my life to taking care of patients, whether in a private practice, as a volunteer, or a member of the federal teams. There are 0 physicians in the Florida State Senate. $37 billion, 42% of the state budget is health and human services. So there's nobody who is in the state Senate who is involved in the delivery of health care. So how does legislation occur? From lobbyists, insurance companies, telling them exactly what they think patients need. That is my #1 issue, and that's why I decided to run for office. As many of you know, I've never run for political office, but that is the big issue that I believe needs attention. I want to expand Medicaid, I want to get a waiver for the Affordable Care Act, and to try to convene, after I'm elected, a group of individuals from this area, hospital administrators, small business owners, practicing physicians, and say, look, what can we agree on? Because I trust these people. The physicians who may interact with the Florida State Senate are paid by the insurance companies, or they're not in private practice. That's what I want. I want common sense solutions. I want to be able to work with both members of either political party. I want to do what's best for the patient.
Okay. Let's look ahead to the 2019 legislative session. If you're elected, what is the first bill that you file in the session? Start with you, Doctor.
The first bill I would file would be to revisit, as I've said for most of my remarks, expansion of Medicaid, to work with the governor, and to obtain a waiver for the Affordable Care Act.
Okay, thank you. Gayle?
The first bill I would introduce would be Legacy 2.0, and it would be an expanded version of Legacy 2.0. As I mentioned earlier, Legacy 2.0 really deals with the Indian River Lagoon. However, I think we also need to address all the estuaries that are feeding the Indian River Lagoon. And it sets up a dedicated funding source, the same model that we used in Legacy Florida, to really make sure that we had those funds year over year. 7.6% of Amendment 1 money, using Amendment 1 money as it was intended to be used, in order to really address the awful things that are going on in the Indian River Lagoon. Part of what I would do within that is also add my harmful algae bloom task force to start to address what is going on from the healthcare point of view. I think that is absolutely key. Bringing together that consortium of research institutions. Harbor Branch, we have a great institute right here. I was just over in Wauchula meeting with Representative Albritton, who is chair of in the legislature in the past, has been chair of Agriculture and Natural Resources. I met with him and the folks from the Marine Institute. I would also include in that the University of Florida. Their Water Institute does major research and it deals with this issue up in the St. Johns River area. I think we need to look about this across the state because algae blooms take place across the state. So I would make that part and parcel of Legacy Florida, but Also make sure that we have separate funding for that research. Again, continuing ongoing research so that we could look at really what is causing all this, what we can do about it, what technology is out there to deal with it. I get people in my office with, you know, this cure, that cure. Everybody's got a cure to deal with algae blooms. You know, how are we going to clean it up? How are we going to get rid of it? How are we going to prevent it? We really need some direction and guidance from our research institutions to really look at what works and what doesn't.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. Open it to the board. Anybody have a question? I've got two more. And I will preface this question by saying the question I'm about to ask the two of you completely stumped our previous candidates. Edward O'Connor and Marilyn Magar struggled to answer this one. So if you guys can provide us with an answer, we're going to be real impressed. One of the criteria that our board uses to evaluate candidates is their commitment to ethics and transparency. Can you provide our board with an example from it can be from your political career, your business career, that illustrates your commitment to ethics and or transparency?
I can address some of that. I think many of the bills that we've passed in the legislature during my time there have really opened up and put more transparency into state government. Making sure budgets are online. In fact, I sponsored a bill along that line years ago. I think every city, county, and state needs to put those budgets online. Also, contracts. You know, so many things get written into contracts. I think that's another thing that has now been put online. Transparency in pricing in healthcare. I have been a healthcare administrator. I ran my husband's practice for many, many years. There is no transparency in healthcare pricing. I think what we have done really through the ACA website to help patients make decisions and to really look for who's charging what for various procedures. So pricing in healthcare is key. It also gives patients the ability to look and see the quality measures as well, and we put that in recently as well. So I am all about transparency. We have passed the strongest ethics bill in the country. You know, I think we eliminated lobbyist funding of even a glass of water. So and I have been part and parcel of really going down this strict guidelines as to how you enforce ethics in the legislature.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Levy.
Well, being a political newcomer, I don't have a record, a political record. I can say in my years in practice, I was never sued. I never had a malpractice suit. I believed in communicating with my patients, and I think that had a lot to do with it. My personal life, I don't have any lawsuits. I've never been arrested, no DUIs, no mugshots. So I'm not accepting any money from the sugar industry. I'm not accepting any money from the sugar industry and from other industries that I deem not presentable.
Okay, thank you. Final question, and I'll start with you, Dr. Levy. Take 60 seconds and tell us why voters should choose your name in November.
As I mentioned at least a half a dozen times, there are no physicians in the state Senate. With $37 billion, it's high time that somebody who's involved in the delivery of health care is involved in how some of the laws and regulations are instituted. That is the big, that they should vote for me for that reason. I'm a small business owner. I'm not a tax and spend liberal that just wants to throw money at everything. I believe that I can work across party lines and not just be a sycophant for the Republican Party and just push a button. I believe we need some balance of power, and that's why I believe I'm the most qualified individual to work on the Treasure Coast for the benefit of the citizens of the Treasure Coast.
Okay, thank you. Gayle?
Thank you very much. You know, I think experience matters in the legislature. I've had the honor and privilege to serve the people of Treasure Coast and have gotten lots of things done. There's lots of things that still need to be done, and you need a watchdog there, somebody who knows how to do things, how to get things done. In the healthcare arena, I'm very pleased to have been endorsed by the Florida Medical Association and also FOMA, the Florida Osteopathic Medical Association. I've worked very closely in the healthcare industry, having run a very large medical practice. So I have the experience in that arena as well. And I am passionate about education. I've taught in our public schools. I really have done major legislation dealing with dyslexia. And we're changing the game for kids, for our struggling readers. So I have the experience to get things done. And my number one issue is our river. I have fought this fight. I have been there. I will continue to be the dog and fight the fight. I don't give up. I am the poster child for perseverance, and I certainly would appreciate the voters of District 25 helping me return to the legislature so I can be their voice in the legislature.
Yes.
May I ask Representative Harrell a quick question? On August 29th, I sent you an email congratulating you on your win, as well as challenging you to a series of debates at the time and place of your choosing. I believe that this forum is a good start, but I think the citizens and the residents of the Treasure Coast demand a more fleshed out, let's say, performance or a fleshed out situation. Are you committed to a series of debates at a time and place of your choosing?
I am committed to debates that are put on by entities such as the League of Women Voters. Last week, any public debate that is put on by an entity that is a legitimate entity in this community. The League of Women Voters is a perfect example. This last primary season, I believe I participated in a debate that the city of Stuart put on, a debate that the city of Port St. Lucie put on, a variety of debates. A local church group put one on. Any entity that is a legitimate entity in this community, I will participate. As long as there are other legislators, all legislators should be there. This is not a one-on-one, me against him. I think we have plenty of opportunity where you bring county commissioners together, you bring state representative candidates together, and we all need to be part of this community. Our community needs to hear from all of us.
All right, on that note, Dr. Levy, Representative Harrell, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Very
Appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you.